Izuku Midoriya with Sukuna's curse technique. So, cleave and dismantle. The ability to cut and sever both living and non-living things. Now, I can never remember which one's for living and which one's for non-living things, but either way, that doesn't really matter. If I happen to say one, but mix up which one is for living and non-living things, don't kill me. I'm not perfect. But you're giving someone like Midoriya, with his analytical mind, the versatility of this technique. Now, yes, this technique is pretty damn versatile despite how simple it is. Because, sure, Sukuna mainly uses it just for murder, but just, like, I don't even have to give examples in Universe of My Hero. Just think about it. Anyone with the most basic common sense could think of how versatile the ability to cut and or sever anything is. With Midoriya, he'd be able to use it to get rid of rubble if it's on top of people. He could just pretty much get rid of any kind of terrain hazards. Plus, even if he does use it on a person, there's no saying he has to use it to end them. You know, this sounds kind of brutal, but imagine if he just goes up to Overhaul and just cleaves his hands off, then he can't use his quirk anymore. Now, sure, that does seem a bit intense for Midoriya, but think about it. If the circumstances called for it, he's smart enough to know that if he touches anyone or anything, he could just instantly destroy it. So, as long as he doesn't use it to take someone out, I think it would be acceptable to disable a person's quirk just by doing a little slicing and dicing. Not to mention, imagine if the power output of Cleave and Dismantle were amplified by the potency of One For All's capabilities. Like, think how One For All seems to boost other quirks. Imagine if it were to do the same to Sukuna's curse technique. And when it comes to going against someone like Shigaraki, especially by the time of the second war arc, Midoriya in the beginning, sure, he didn't want to kill Shigaraki, but by the time All For One had, taken over the mind, he had effectively given up on the whole saving Shigaraki thing. So imagine he doesn't use it until All For One takes over Shigaraki. It's like, well, I can't save him anymore. Might as well go all out. Domain expansion, and just activate Sukuna's shrine. If he does that, sure, the healing might be able to deal with him and just outpace the pace of the shrine. But I can't remember if by the end of that, the quirks were still being disabled by somebody. If they were, it's wraps. Because unless he has that healing factor, he is not outpacing the potency and power of Sukuna's shrine. Especially if the potency of the slashes are being amplified in power and speed by the potency of One For All. If that is happening, then even with a healing factor, he might not survive that. And thanks to Cleave and Dismantle being able to cut and sever living and non-living things, if All For One were to fire a quirk that were to fire something that is technically not living, like, let's say he shoots a metal cable from his arm, for example, I don't know, you'd be able to use one of those two things to cut that, because it's non-living, or cut All For One himself with it. And unless your speed is comparable to the likes of Sukuna, you can't even perceive those slashes. So, unless your speed is comparable to the top speed of Midoriya, which most characters aren't, you wouldn't even be able to process the slashes and be able to defend against them. You're pretty much just wide open to getting slashed immediately.